panel. We are pleased to have some real experts here today. Thank you guys so much for your time. If you could quickly introduce yourself, what you do at Bright Network, your years of experience, and a pop-up question, which is if you needed to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would you eat?
Hi everyone. I'm Ali. My pronouns are he/him. I'm a white man currently wearing a black t-shirt. I'm head of people here at Bright Network, and I've been working in HR and recruitment in the early career space for around 10 years now. And if I could only eat one meal for the rest of my life, it would be a roast dinner.
Great choice. Phil, over to you.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Phil. I am the Careers and Community Manager within Bright Network Tech Academy, but I've been part of Bright Network for approaching 6 years, which is terrifying. I am a white male. I've accidentally dressed as a fisherman today. I've got my blue jumper on and a face full of stubble, which is whiter than I wish it was. And I've got glasses on. If I could eat one, it's going to be crisps, Nat. Just crisps. Yeah. Keep it simple. Crisps.
Thank you. And last but not least, Shanice.
Hello, my name is Shanice. My pronouns are she, her. I've got blonde hair. I'm a white female wearing a black t-shirt and some blue light glasses to stop them blue rays from getting into my eyesight. So I'm a talent partner here at Bright Network. I'm actually quite new to Bright Network. I started in December, but I've been working in the recruitment space now for coming up to 6 years. If I had to eat one meal for the rest of my life, it would probably be a Wicked Zinger Tower box meal from KFC, because that is just the best meal to go for.
Some real strong answers. But no, thank you very much for being here. It's a real wealth of knowledge and super excited. Due to the lack of time, I'm just going to go straight in for the questions. I will direct each question to a particular panelist. However, if you would like to add on with additional tips or different information, please feel free to jump on. If not, I'll just go to the next question. Right, so starting off, when going through an application, could you name the top 3 things you look for first? And I'll pass this question to Shanice.
Thank you. So actually really similar to what Katie was speaking about when it came to applications for events. So when applying for anything, whether it be a job role or events, it's just really important to look at what you are actually writing and look at what you're actually answering. So I'd say the first thing to note is there most likely is going to be a word count. So for example, here at Bright Network, we have a 250 word count. That is one of the things I look for to see if a candidate has gone near to that mark. If you're only writing one sentence or an NA answer, for example, that Katie showed, that shows to me that you're actually not that interested in the opportunity and you're actually just looking for a job. I want to see that you're interested in our opportunity. So I want to see that you've put that effort in to actually meet the word count and put that detail in that we're looking for. Secondly, it most likely will be the case that in an application for a job role, they'll ask you why you want to work within that particular role or why you want to work at that particular company. Research is key for this. Make sure you research into the company, look at what the business actually does, look at what their mission is, and speak about why that is of interest to you. Make sure that you're showing your passion within that answer as well. And then finally, when it comes to spelling, punctuation and grammar, of course, the odd spelling mistake here and there, we're not going to care too much about, but if it's filled with mistakes and errors, again, to me, it shows you haven't really made the effort to ensure that you've put forward a really good application. And we just really want to see that effort and passion from you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to jump on? Okay, and we'll move on. So Shanice, you touched on typos, so it's a great segue to my next question. Aside from typos, what is a common mistake that you see in CVs or applications all the time? And I'll hand this to Phil.
Thank you. There are lots. To pick one would be. I think common ones, typos, spelling mistakes, things like that happen. I think the biggest ones are copy paste CVs or copy paste applications. I sometimes see CVs which talk about I'm looking for a job in software development when you've applied for a role in, I don't know, veterinary care, and you haven't given that thought, CVs with, or applications with the wrong company name on, where you just lifted your last one, thrown it in there. That tends to happen where people are applying for too many things. You haven't got that headspace to keep on top of it all at the same time. My advice on that is to keep templates, because applying for a job and writing applications is a pain. It takes a lot of time. So I think have a template for by sector, by role, by company, that sort of thing. So you don't have to start all the time again, because the theory is every CV and application should be slightly different, and your CV should never be static for too long, because you're always picking up skills that you can add. So I think I'd go with that. This is I shouldn't admit this, but my personal one is, if you put attention to detail in your CV, I'll go through it looking for something that's not attention to detail, like a typo or a mistake or something. That's my bugbear. Not my bugbear, but I will go looking for it. And that's a point about like proving what you talk about. Don't just tell me, like, the other thing I was going to mention is sort of being generic or vague, cliche. You avoid those things by backing that up, giving it details. So it's one thing to say I'm a great communicator. That may well be true, but I don't know it. I'm a great communicator because what does it mean to you? Where does that skill come from? How have you developed it? Is it a natural skill? Is it something you've worked on? That level of detail is what I'm looking for.
Wow, it's really interesting. Thank you. And then, of course, we're talking about the application process. There are some common misconceptions in the application process. Can you name a few, Ali, and debunk them for our audience?
I think one, especially for people maybe applying like via somewhere like LinkedIn, you can see the number of people who've applied for a job already. And so often people don't apply because they think, oh, too many people have applied for that. I'm never going to be the one person who gets that job, or I'm never going to get hired because there's too many people. But you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Another one is around deadlines. Sometimes if you've missed the deadline, but the job advert's still up, people don't apply. But actually, maybe they just haven't got around to refreshing the deadline, or maybe they just they haven't hired someone from the first original batch, and therefore the job is still live. So whilst it can be difficult to know what's going on behind the scenes, you have to remember that you don't know what's going on behind the scenes and how the company is managing applicants on the other side. So if you see a role that you are really excited by, apply for it, because there are so many roles out there. If something is really, really exciting for you, apply for it regardless of how many people you can see have applied, or when the deadline was, or when the deadline will be, or maybe there's one logistical thing that might be tricky, like a start date when you have a holiday clash or something along those lines. If it's something that you're really, really, really keen on, you don't know what opportunities for and conversations might be on the other side. So always put your hat in the ring.
Thank you. I've also heard like some people say that the CVs and applications are screened by AI. Is that true, or is that a
No,
misconception?
they're screened by Ali, not AI.
Right.
Good.
So,
Nah,
yeah.
I'll just jump in on that, because it's a massive thing at the minute. Obviously, ChatGPT is everywhere. Yeah, a lot of people assume that we are machines. I know Bright Network's different to a lot of employers out there, but I've been in this gig a long time. I've not worked with a single company who use AI to screen either CVs, applications, or video interviews. They are people, and one of the reasons why it takes so long is because people read those things and watch those videos. So if an application process has taken a while, I think don't worry, because it means you're in a pile somewhere waiting for a human to watch these things or read these things. Very quickly, I know Google did roll out an AI application kit in the States. This is a couple of years, well, more than a couple of years ago, because I'm old. But they rolled it out as part of a diversity push within their tech team, and found that the algorithm was actually reinforcing sort of what they'd been hiring over the past sort of 40, 50 years. So they had to shut it down and start again, because the algorithm was just reinforcing what they were trying to get away from, which was quite interesting. But yeah, there's a massive misconception about companies spending money on AI kits to read CVs when it's much cheaper to get muggins to do it.
Right. So yeah, make sure that you are putting your best forward, because it's actual human beings reading your application and reading your CV. Great. On the note of CV, how important is it to have a good CV? Because I know that there is a drop in the trend of using CVs for applications. I think most companies are just having like an application form, for example. So how useful do you think it is to have a CV these days? And I'll start with Phil.
I mean, it's still out there now. I'm sorry. I mean, I know there's a drop. I think actually, 'cause someone mentioned cover letters in the chat before. I think there's a move away from cover letters as opposed to CVs for me personally, because unless you asked for one, don't bother with a cover letter. I don't just personally rate them. But your CV is, like you say, it's the first impression that you're going to make. It's the first thing that's going to land on someone's desk. I think there's a move within public sector away from CVs into that sort of bias-free screening, which a lot of companies are putting money into and trying to move towards, but we're not there yet. So CV for me is still a vital sort of building block of this application process. So your CV needs to be brilliant. I know when I'm screening, like a good, clean one-page CV, everything's there, it's clear, I can find it all. I'm just like, this makes my job really easy. Away you go into the next stage, easy peasy within seconds. So yeah, making sure your CV is specific, detailed but not too detailed. Your sentence construction, so I use of bullet points, so I know exactly what I'm reading about when. I think start your bullet points with the action word or the skill you can develop. To demonstrate, rather, don't waste time telling me who the company is or oh, on this project I did this thing. I don't care. I want to know what you did within that context. That's what's important to me. So I'm sorry, I think a good CV is still for me vital. And when we lose them, if we lose them, because it's hard, I think that, like I said, there's more of a trend within public sector to get away from CVs and just see what people can do in the room. But I don't think we're there yet. So yeah, make sure your CV is marvelous.
I think just to add to that as well, I actually used to work for a business where we didn't used to look at CVs to begin with. It was just like a blind recruitment process, just seeing the application answers, and then we decided who we want to take forward to interview. But when we were taking them forward to interview, we would still require a CV. So that's why it's really important that you do have a good CV, because even if it's not in the initial application process that you give it in, at some point in that interview process, you will be showing your CV. So it's important to really make a good first impression.
Right. On that note, then, do you have one piece of advice to make the CV stand out? I know Phil said one pager, right? So that's one, clear and concise, and start with the action that, so for example, don't blab on about the company or the project, start with what you've done. Anything else to add to that, to those three gems?
Yeah, those are really good points. I think another thing that I really like to see is if you've applied for a certain role, actually kind of tailoring your CV to that role. So even just having relevant work experience section that's related to that role, or even I've seen a lot of candidates do it in their initial personal statement, speaking about their summary of themselves, and then saying, and I am looking for a role within X industry. If it's the industry that I'm hiring for or the role that I'm hiring for, straight away I'm like, great, I want to speak to this candidate because I know straight away that they're actually interested in this. So that's a good thing to do. I really like seeing that.
I would add, like, follow a standard CV format. Don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel, because the reason that stands out is I, as the person reviewing the CV, know exactly where to find all of the key information. So it's going to take me the least amount of time to properly and thoroughly review your CV in comparison to a CV which has maybe taken a different approach. You try to be creative, but the issue there is often you won't lay things out in an approach that the interviewer or the recruiter will be expecting, and therefore they might miss some of the important information that you're trying to get across as well. So as bizarre as it may sound, actually sticking within the confines of a normal CV template is definitely encouraged.
Yeah, so Word document maybe then. Word doc CV templates. Great, no, thank you. So we've got the application down, the CV down, and then pops this test, psychometric tests, personality tests, situation judgment tests. Could you give us some insights into these and how applicants should tackle them, Phil?
I can, I will. So these are creeped. That's not a word. These are crept in over the past few years, and I think everybody hates them because you apply for a job, you just want to speak to a human as soon as possible. There are lots of steps in place now. Employers use them because it gives more people access to the opportunity. It removes that human element, so we haven't got to like diarize me and Ali having a meeting to meet somebody. These tests are little hurdles along the way. So the trouble is, they're here to stay, I'm afraid, whether you love them or hate them, and a lot of people don't respond to them at all. And whether you agree with the psychology behind them is a moot point in terms of like psychometric testing, in terms of situation judgment. A lot of the thought behind it says we can predict what sort of employee you will be. I had a meeting with Joe, who is my boss in BNC today. We use a company called Arctic Shores, who are brilliant. They do a lot of approaching like the psychometric testing from a psychological kind of level. That's great. but a lot of it is driving data for us. And we had a meeting today and says, what does success look like within our testing, within BNTA? We don't really know. Yeah, there's a lot of data flying around, but employers like to nail that down. So they're here to stay. In terms of situation judgment tests, things like that, practice is key. I did fling Katie a practice site to the Capfinity one, which is when I do careers advice, is my standard one. Capfinity, I haven't cornered the market, but they do a lot of psychometric testing with a lot of big companies and tailor their stuff there. So if you've not done them before, I'd say jump on that website and have a little play. But the more you do them, the more you get used to them. There's a time pressure on there with some of these, which is an extra distraction, something to stress you out. That's kind of part of the game, that seeing how you respond to a little bit of pressure. I'm dreadful at these things now. I have tried, as part of my job, I had to go through these tests, and I'm always rubbish. I always hide my scores. And the reason I'm rubbish is because I don't take time in the prep. I like skip through the instructions, being like, blah, 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 blah. I've heard it all before. Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I get into the test itself and go, what am I supposed to be doing? Oh, I didn't read the thing. So I think a common one is don't rush into it. You're given think time, you're given prep time, you're given practice time. Use those things. So when you get into the test for real, you're in a settled place. You're not panicking about what you need to do, and can do the test as best you can. But yeah, just kind of get used to them and practice them as best you can. There's no other way around it, I don't think, unless anyone's got any other words of wisdom. Good.
The main objective, would you say, is to test what sort of employee you could potentially be?
Yes. And that, again, without getting myself in trouble, in terms of what that's built on, in terms of getting data, the psychology behind it, whether it works or not, is a moot one for me. But I think it's an easy box tick for an employer.
Fair enough. Do you also think it could be like a hurdle to discourage that many applicants and see who really wants a job?
I mean, it shouldn't be, but I guess it could be. We find what I'd say on that point is because I've worked on campaigns that have been really, really busy, but I've worked on campaigns that have been tumbleweed for various reasons. And if I'm in a campaign that's busy, I will look for reasons to remove people from that. I have the luxury to be able to go, okay, well, who's not done this bit? Who's outscored who? Whereas if I'm in a campaign that's not got many applications, I will flip around and look for reasons to keep people in the process. So depending on numbers wise, it shouldn't be a hurdle. And interestingly, there are lots of companies now pushing money into using the psychometric data, looking at what stages people do drop off, what is putting off applicants, what is driving them away, what is the stage where they go, I can't do this anymore, I'm not invested enough, and try and sort of adjust that a little bit.
Right.
So it's not just a big old wall you've got to climb over, but in terms of getting through them, practice is key. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I do believe Katie will share a link where you can access these practice tests, and hopefully it will help you in your career journey. Moving on to recorded video interviews, though popular with employers, not so much with applicants. Why is it important, and how can we come across as authentic as possible when we are basically talking to yourself? I'll hand this over to Ali.
I think they'll hit the nail on the head really, but like it's a very similar answer to the psychometric tests in the context there. You have to remember that often companies who are introducing video interviews are doing so because they have dealt with they're handling a volume of applications which they cannot handle in an efficient and a timely manner if they're going to have a full phone interview on that basis, and often that would mean that the application process would take much longer as well in order to get all of those phone interviews scheduled, right? If you think each person requires a 30-minute phone interview, that might mean that you can only squeeze in a certain number a day, so that would take weeks and weeks and weeks. By completing video and asking applicants to complete video interviews, it means the application window can be a lot quicker and a lot more efficient for the company. So there is logic there behind the madness, whilst it can feel frustrating. And behind the scenes, we know that can be frustrating. And that's why we often try and make it as simple as possible where there are video interviews. So for example, allowing you the opportunity to re-record answers, allowing you pause time before kind of the immediately beginning recording your answer, so that there's intention. It's not intending to catch you out or to be difficult. It's intending to make all parties' application process as efficient as possible. I think in terms of like the one piece of advice I can give is often people will see a 2-minute answer slot, and people feel the need to they panic, see that 2 minutes and think, how on earth am I going to talk for 2 minutes about this answer? 2 minutes is just the maximum cutoff. Give the answer that you think is the most appropriate, and then stop. And if that lasts 1 minute, that is absolutely fine. If that lasts 30 seconds, but it has a really punchy point in it that gets your point across, fantastic. And if it lasts 1 minute and 59 seconds, also absolutely fine. But I think people see that cutoff point, panic, and either can't think of anything or waffle for 2 minutes. And when we're reviewing the video interviews, that's often what we see. Like, more often than not, we would see like either a really, really short panicked answer or someone who just waffles for the entire 2 minutes. So don't panic, focus on the question at hand, irrespective of how long you've got. You will not, then when you get to the 2 minutes, you just need to focus on wrapping it up quickly if you've reached that point, but don't try and deliberately fill the 2 minutes.
I think to add to that as well, try not to treat it any differently to an interview that you'd have with another person in that call as well. I think particularly, I remember when I first was on the job search a few years ago, and I was like looking at different opportunities. I had to do a few of these video interviews, and I just treated it so differently to an actual interview, and that's not a good way to go about it. Just treat it exactly the same. It's pretty much as if you're, I don't know, for example, you've probably had experiences where you voice note your friends rather than seeing them. Treat it a bit like that, obviously a bit more professionally than if you were voice noting a friend, but you're not always going to be speaking to someone on the other side, and that's fine. Just treat it like a normal interview.
Love that.
Can I jump in quickly now as well, just on that, because I've watched a billion, and I think just to go back to that point, it's going to be a human watching this, so, and we respond to being humans, and try and don't waste time introducing, like saying good morning or thanking someone for the interview. You've got 2 minutes to answer a question, so don't worry about, like, I know Shanisa said, treat it like you're talking to a person, definitely, but all the niceties we haven't got time for. You've got 2 minutes to answer a question. Make sure you answer the question that's given, not the question you think. A lot of people will read the start of the question and go, oh, I think I know what this is, I've prepared for this, and then go off topic completely. So my tip is, like, write down the question. It won't disappear from the screen, or it shouldn't do, but when the question comes in, write down, okay, what do I need to cover? Maybe 3 bullet points. So what are the 3 things I need to say in this question? And that gives you a little simple structure to follow when you're answering it. Don't panic if something goes wrong. If something does go wrong, laugh it off and move on, because as a human, we respond to that. Keep it professional, obviously. And yeah, my main point is everyone hates these. All the time I've been doing this, I've never met anyone who's gone, brilliant, a one-way video interview. That's my favorite thing. Embrace the awkwardness. Everyone feels a bit icky with them. Just, it's part of the thing. Embrace the ick. And just what you should be confident in a video interview is talking about you, your experience, and why you'd be good for the job. So settle in that confidence rather than worrying about, oh, it's a bit weird.
Yeah, I think tagline of the day: embrace the ick. It's what it is. Moving on to face-to-face interviews. Well, not face-to-face, but like something like this on a virtual call. I know I find it hard to even like showcase my qualities in a day, let alone like in an hour. What is your best advice? How are we able to come across as competent, personable, and reliable all at once in like an hour, sometimes even less? I'll hand this to you, Ali.
I think the most important thing to remember is you can't do all of that in the time period, right? And the moment you try and cram all of those things in, all of the examples you've got prepared, all of the like experiences you've got, you want to reference every single job you've ever had, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Instead, really think about, what's the purpose of this particular interview? Is this a values and culture interview? Is this a competency interview? Is this a presentation? Therefore, what am I going to be assessed on? Do your research on that particular area. So, for example, if it is a cultural interview, values and culture interview, make sure you have read the company values, understand therefore what they are going to be looking for, and make sure you have examples that cater to those particular things. If it's a competency interview, make sure that you have read the job description, identified the key competencies that they are going to be requiring for that particular role, and make sure you have examples for those competencies. Trying to claim that you are both creative and analytical and great examples of teamwork and great examples of leadership and great examples of PowerPoint. It's not possible to do all of that, but you don't need to do all of that. Instead, focus on the like maybe 5 key points or the 3 values or the 4 competencies, whatever it is, but make sure you've done your research and you tailor the examples to what the purpose of that interview is. And don't worry, because there will be other rounds where you'll be able to bring up other examples that you haven't.
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, worst case scenario, if you don't mention a particular thing that your interviewers want to hear about, they will just ask a follow-up question about it. That is literally the worst case scenario. Like, your interviewers, they're not sitting there thinking, oh, I really want to catch this person out. I really want them to do badly, so I'm not going to find out more about them. They want you to do well. So if they feel as though you've got a bit of information that you haven't really said too much yet, they'll follow up, literally worst case scenario. So it's good to keep that in mind as well.
That's great. And then on to my last question. Let's talk etiquette. So, like we've all been there when we've applied for a job or done an interview and it just feels like it never happened or it didn't exist because no one is getting back to us. So what is like the proper protocol and or good interviewing etiquette? How do we follow up? When do we follow up? Is it right to get in touch with recruiter on LinkedIn? All these questions. If you could just give us a summary, and I'll start with Shanice.
Yeah, of course. So I think, as we've mentioned quite a few times now, it's really important to note that the recruiter that is dealing with your application or your overall interview process is human, and there's a lot of things going on. So there's absolutely no problem at all in following up to find out what the status of your application or interview is. But just remember, they're not going to look at your application and get back to you within a day, unless they're not very busy, but most likely it's going to be the case that they're busy, so they're not going to get back to you within a day, for example. When it comes to submitting an application, I actually quite like it when someone connects with me on LinkedIn when they've submitted the application and they've said, hey, just wanted to let you know that I've applied for this role, looking forward to hearing back from you. If you haven't heard back from the recruiter, I'd say within a week, I think it's definitely okay to follow up then and be asked, what is the status of my application? Again, worst case scenario, the recruiter will say, really sorry, still reviewing applications. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So do keep that in mind. When it comes to interview etiquette, another thing that I really like is when I have initial calls with candidates, when they email me afterwards to say, hey, thank you so much for that call. I really enjoyed learning more about it. Looking forward to hearing about the next step. I think that's just such a nice personal touch to include. And also feeling free to send that to the hiring managers during the interview processes and the interviewers that you've been involved in. It's not always going to be the case that you have their email addresses, so you can always feel free to email the recruiter who you're working with to ask them to relay that message to hiring managers. Now, a good interviewer will tell you when you should hear back by. So if you are here a certain date when you should hear back by, of course, if you don't hear back by that date, the day after or the weekend after, for example, if it's on a Friday, feel free to get in contact and just send a nice worded email. But if you have not yet heard back in terms of when you should actually be hearing back, I'd maybe wait till the end of the week of that week just to basically like ask for a follow-up, or alternatively at the end of the interview, just ask, when should I hear back? If you forget to ask at the end, feel free to message the recruiter and ask when you should hear back by.
That's great. Anyone else want to jump in before we head on to Q&A?
I'll leap in just on a little thing, just because Shanice mentioned LinkedIn there, which is useful. There's sometimes a bit of, if a job offer doesn't go your way, there's a bit of reticence to get in touch. I would encourage you to do that, because Shanice said, if you've had an interview, you've met someone within that company, you've got like what is a warm contact there. And for me, if the job doesn't go your way, don't like LinkedIn message someone being like, what did I do wrong? That's like not going to fly. But if you've got close to a job and they've said, not this time, no thanks, going back to that person saying, thanks for the interview, make it specific. I really enjoyed meeting you and talking about X, Y, Z. Again, making it I can't say that word. Specificity is key. And then just saying, I'm really interested in working for you and your team. If you could keep me in the loop for any future opportunities, that sort of thing goes over well, rather than like LinkedIn, abusive, demanding feedback. Why has this happened to me? Because I'm brilliant. Of course you are. but you've missed out on this job for some reason. You might get feedback, you might not. But even if the job doesn't go your way, there's a positive way of reaching out just to reinforce your interest and you are a going concern, so that if this role comes around again or there's something else within the office, because hiring works on internal referrals as well. I can say, I interviewed with Nat. She wasn't quite right for my team, but you need to have a look at her CV. I can pass that internally. So even if a job doesn't go your way, making those targeted, detailed connections, I think is worth it as well.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Shouldn't burn bridges, right?
Ooh.
You never know who you'll come across again in your career. But I will say this though, it has happened to me in the past where I have interviewed with someone. They said, "We'll get back to you with a time," and then they just didn't respond for like weeks on weeks, and they suddenly emailed me. But at that point, I felt like, I'm sorry, this is a bit disorganized, so I'm not going to go ahead with the interview. But I feel empowered as well. If someone's not really responding the way you want it, maybe you don't want to work for that company, and there are better ones out there. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's where you need to remember as well, interviews and like whole job processes, it's a two-way street. You're not just interviewing for that job and wanting your interviewers to like you, but you also want to go into that knowing that you want to like that business as well. So if they're messing you around, that's probably not really the type of business you'd want to work for.
That's fair. We've got a few questions coming in. Um, it says here, why after denying an application, no information is given about the reason?
That's normally a resourcing. That's normally a resourcing issue in my experience. To get in touch with and it depends on what stage you've missed out on the process as well. I know, because feedback is gold dust. I know that. I'm a big advocate of feedback. But normally where a company don't give feedback or ghost you, it's normally about resourcing and saying, like, we physically haven't got the time to get back to everybody who's applied. It's a bit of a brush off, yes, but you can kind of understand it. If I've got 80,000 applications to go back to, I can't individually go through all of them and say, you did this, you did this. Also, maybe the company doesn't have a great like a good culture of feedback there, because feedback can be tricky. Delivering good feedback is hard, and doing that well takes time, takes thought. So if that's not done well, maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're embarrassed because you missed out on the job and they don't quite know. They don't want to upset you, and they'd rather just kind of ignore that. It's not great practice, but it happens. I think the important thing is, if you do get ghosted, not take it personally. If you get feedback of any sort, take it on, have a think about it. There might be something you can sort of learn or adapt in where you've approached. Like I say, it depends when in the process you've dropped out, but yeah, don't take it personally, and don't think you're the only person in that situation, because feedback is incredibly rare. I think we're getting better at it as a kind of industry, but yeah, I don't take it personally. Ask for feedback by all means, but again, ask in a way that frames it positively. I know the job didn't go my way, but I'd really appreciate some feedback because I'm interested in this sector or this role, blah, 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 rather than, I didn't get the job on your team, tell me why.
Why?
It's very aggressive, and I'm just going to forget that email existed. Whereas if you engage with me and say, I'd really like to improve this element of whatever, can you chime in on that?
Thank you. Sorry, the time is running by real quickly. This is a great question. How do I show my interest slash passion in the industry with little to no experience?
Honestly, I think the best way to do this is genuinely just through research. I've noticed, like, the candidates that show that they've really researched into the company and they've really researched into the industry, they're then able to look at that research and think, okay, why does the research that I've done about this company actually interest me? Why is this all interested me? Why does this industry interest me? And that's all to do with research. If you're able to show that you're researched, you're able to explain why that research is of interest to you, you genuinely will actually get your passion through that. So I think that's just really important to keep doing that research.
All right, on to the next question. Ali, I know you mentioned like following a pattern for CVs, right? Someone has asked if it's okay to highlight soft skills on the CV in bullet points, or just have that included in the work experience.
Yes, but don't know if it duplicates. So if it's already highlighted in the work experience, then don't. But if you found that you've got a number of key skills that you're not able to succinctly highlight somewhere else, then yes, that makes sense. But I think, to Phil's point, a really impressive one pager is a great sign. So you want to avoid any duplication. So if that is highlighted in the work experience already or somewhere else, then don't.
You know, that's great.
Sorry, I'll just jump in. I think context is key as well. If you've got a list of skills that just hang in isolation, I don't know what to do with those. But if you can say, from my work experience, from my academic experience, I picked up this skill in this place doing this thing. You can do that hard skills, soft skills, software skills, any sort of skill, but giving it that context of I learned this here, I picked up this skill or developed this skill in this context. And that can be from anywhere. You paid, unpaid, you might have accrued at McDonald's, you might have worked in a restaurant, what are the transferable skills, but also what's going on in your life outside of that in terms of volunteering, giving back to the community. Are you involved in a society, in a club, tutoring, mentoring, teaching people? All of that is relevant. It doesn't have to be a paid job.
No, that's great. Yeah, makes sense. Especially for students, if it's not a paid role, but anything, right, to show experience and skills. That's great. And this is for interviewing. So when questioned in an interview, is it better to come across as reflective, or is that unconfident, or better to come across as confident, or will that be misconstrued as arrogant?
Come across as yourself is the better answer. Like, don't intentionally try and pause if you don't need to pause. Likewise, don't rush in if you don't need to rush in. Answer, take a second and go with your answer. And if you need to spend more time reflecting, that is absolutely fine. And if you if you've got an instant reaction, that's also fine. But an authentic response is far better than either a confident or reflective response.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the question as well. Like if you're asked, say, for example, you apply for a role at Bright Network and you were asked, why do you want to work for Bright Network? And you go, oh, that's a good question. Then I would sit there thinking, well, that's one of the first things you should know how to answer. So, that's just an expectation that you'd have from an interview. So it depends on the context as well. Like if it's a question that is obvious it's going to come up, don't try and act like you're reflecting because it might come across really bad and unprepared.
No, that's a good point. No, that's a really great point. Thank
Can I
you.
just chime in on that
Mhm.
reflective point? Because as an interviewer, there's nothing worse than asking someone a question, they've been dead silence. Like if you're having a think, let me know you're thinking. It's like, that's a good question. Can I take a second to think about that? And I go, oh, okay, they're thinking about that. Rather than I've asked you a question, are you panicking? Are you going to burst into tears and leave the room? What's happening? Like you'd be surprised how invested an interviewer gets in an interview as well, how nervous they are to get it right, to say the right thing. So if you want to ask for think time, ask for think time, that's standard. If you want to repeat the question, in fact, if you want to ask a clarification within that question, that's great because it shows active listening, all that sort of stuff. But as Ali said, clients say to me all the time, be your authentic self. They don't want to meet a version of you that then they get to the workplace and go, who was that? Be your authentic self, whatever that looks like. There are all sorts of abilities, all sorts of personalities out there. They're all valid for workplaces. So don't become a cheerleader. Don't become something you're not. Be your authentic self and come from that place of confidence in who you are and what you can do.
Yeah, well, that's good. And the last one, I think, Ali, I would put this for you because it says, what about the jobs that have ongoing deadlines? What to understand about this, and when should I expect an answer? Because, like, on LinkedIn, you mentioned there's a deadline. What if it's ongoing?
What that probably means is they are they've not yet found the perfect candidate, and therefore that could be you. So I would always just try and apply as quickly as possible. No, not in a way that compromises your application or compromises your CV, but done is also better than perfect. So get the application in as sooner rather than later, to get the ball rolling, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. That could mean interviews have been happening. That could mean a candidate is at final round and they've just got the job advert live just in case. There's a whole host of different scenarios that could be behind the scenes. So if that is a role that really excites you and interests you, then get your application in sooner rather than later. Done better than perfect.
Right, great.
But just to be clear now, if someone's on a rolling deadline or something like that, we're not waiting to get all the CVs before we decide. We're allocating places as we go. So the longer you leave that, the less likely that opportunity is to be when you get through all the different stages. So get in as soon as you can.
Right. No, great. Thank you. Sorry, we are out of time, but thank you so much for your time and your expertise and tips. And hopefully, some of the people on the call will leave with some useful things to take forward in their career. Thank you. I'm just gonna share my screen a few things before you leave. Um, Number one, I'll be sending a post-event survey as soon as this call is done. If you can just share your thoughts or any topics that you would like us to cover in the future, that would be great. We mentioned IEUK, that is Internship Experience UK. It's happening from the 26th to the 29th of June. It is a fully virtual program, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. We are completely open, so male, female, if you've graduated, not graduated yet, you are fully welcome to come and attend the live experience if you are 18 and above. We've got 6 streams this year to choose from, and here are some of the amazing employers that you'll be able to meet, from the likes of Clyde & Co, Google, PwC, UBS, just a load of employers ready and eager to meet you. And what will you gain? You will gain, of course, connections with top employers across the different streams, new skills through the sessions that will be delivered by these employers, a chance to complete a work sample and add experience to your CV. So if you're one of those who was saying that what if you don't have enough experience, attending this and doing an actual work sample demonstrates an interest and passion in that sector. So definitely get applying now. And lastly, bonus, all attendees have a chance to win a summer vacation on us.
What?
If that's not enough, I don't know what is, but thank you again, everyone, for your time today and for joining us on this webinar. It was a real pleasure delivering this topic to you. And from me and the rest of the team, we wish you good luck in your future endeavors of getting a role, and hopefully our advice helped. Thank you once again, and have a lovely afternoon.